So good morning. Welcome to our conversation about outer space and collective intelligence. So my name is Heather Leeson. I'm Data Literacy Lead here at IFRC. And we're very happy today to have Kathy Peach, the Head of Collective Intelligence Design from Nesta, and Andrew Zolli from Planet, who runs Global Impact Initiatives from Planet. And so with that, we will have a bit of a discussion around what is collective intelligence, because I think that in this particular room, there's lots of intelligence, so how can we amass that? And then thinking through what are the new ways. So I would ask you to come, and I didn't hand out 3D glasses today, but I want you to imagine you're going to a movie and you're putting on 3D glasses. Now, I know we have some very practical questions about data protection and all of that, but we kind of want to vision the future as we think about Strategy 2030. So you have your imaginary 3D glasses or VR sets, and those have been handed out to you. So you imagine if we lent a digital hand, what would the Red Cross and Crescent Crescent do with that? And so as we think about digital hand and digital opportunities and risks, I invite Kathy to share a little bit more about collective intelligence.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much to everyone for taking time out of your busy days to be here. And thanks for the invite as well. I'm really excited and pleased to be here. So for those of you who haven't heard of Nesta, we're a global innovation foundation. We're based in the UK, and we're an independent charity. We're funded through an endowment. And really, we are all about innovation that's in the public interest, for the public good. And we do that by funding innovation, by researching innovation, and helping to spread innovation by developing new innovation methods and sharing innovation skills. Now, we tend to work on what we see as the big social issues of the day. So we have large programs of work on things like education and health. And in the last year, we've introduced a new program of work on collective intelligence. So collective intelligence, what is it? I imagine you have all heard lots and lots about artificial intelligence over the last couple of years, lots of exciting developments, lots of hype. But actually, for us, we think there's an even bigger picture, which is how technology is helping lots of human minds come together to collaborate in new ways and at even greater scales. And artificial intelligence plays a part in helping that happen. But first of all, I wanted to kind of jump back in time, because the idea that groups of people are collectively smarter, collectively wiser than any single one individual on their own is not a new idea. And if you go to the early 20th century, there's this great example of a statistician called Francis Galton. He went to a country fair, where people were asked to take part in a competition. What he found was that people's answers varied wildly, but what was surprising was that the average of all of those answers was actually incredibly close to the actual weight of a cow. So today, we see forms of collective intelligence being mobilised at greater scales beyond the kind of country fair and in entirely new ways. And that's really by three main ways. The first is by technology, literally enabling more of us to be connected together, connecting more of our human brains together. The second is by technology helping us to generate more data and novel forms of data. And the third is technology amplifying our human intelligence by performing some of the functions of intelligence that humans are perhaps less good at, such as processing large quantities of data. And so whereas collective intelligence used to be thought of as something that just emerged from groups of people together, we now see collective intelligence emerging from these combinations of groups of people, data, and technology. And it's together that those three elements become greater than the sum of their parts. So collective intelligence is all around us. We see it today in some of the citizen science projects. Have we got any citizen scientists in the room? No? Andrew, great. Zooniverse is one of the big citizen science platforms, and there's a project on it called Galaxy Zoo, where over 1 million people are working together to identify new stars. So this is really changing how scientific research is done. It's opening it up to non-experts, and they are making breakthrough discoveries.
I label pictures of penguins.
The penguins.
It's a dark secret I don't like to discuss in public.
You're not alone.
Yeah. I find constellations in the shape of penguins. Actually, keep going.
It also changes how we produce knowledge. Anyone here not used Wikipedia in the last 2 to 3 months? Made by millions of individual contributions, people working together to improve on and add to this work. And it's also changing how we travel. So I know we use Wade in London. I think we've got it here in Geneva as well. For people who are online, who don't have an app.
I survived, yeah. But I just missed the train, so I just missed the train, sorry. Yeah, fine.
In a city.
No problem. I was just watching a little bit of this collective intelligence. There's this presentation.
And I also think that collective intelligence is going to change how humanitarian work is. So I'm going to talk about the 3 opportunities that I see for humanitarian work or humanitarian action to get smarter by combining the best of machine intelligence, the best data, and the best of human intelligence. And I'll talk through each of those opportunities and then illustrate with some examples of where we already see that happening. So the first opportunity is better predictions before they happen. So everyone in this room and everyone online knows that humanitarian need escalating. We know that demand is outstripping the resources and the money that we have available to respond. And that means that humanitarian organisations need to get better at shifting from waiting for events to occur to acting preemptively, getting better at responding to shifts in risk so that you can respond preemptively to prevent loss or prevent harm. And collective intelligence can help you do that by generating real-time information that's really grounded in local perspectives as an early warning of system risks. Here's an example of where this is already happening. This is the brilliantly named Vampire platform. It's an early warning system for climate impacts. It's developed by UN Global Pulse for the World Food Programme and the Indonesian government. And the way this works is it makes use of existing data sets, but it combines them in a way. So it combines data on populations that are vulnerable, populations that are agriculture dependent, with data on rainfall anomalies and data on vegetation health, which is obviously a proxy for drought. And then it maps economic vulnerability against exposure to drought to create a real-time map of where needs are likely to be greatest so that the government can respond, the WFP can respond much more quickly and prevent crises before they happen. A different type of example is Premise. So this doesn't rely on existing data sets. It generates entirely new sets of data through a human sensor network. They have a contributor base of tens, if not now hundreds of thousands of people who collect data on their mobile phones. You can see someone on the photo taking an image of prices of goods in a market. All of that data from their contributor network gets combined and aggregated, and then algorithms help identify patterns or changes and can then even request their contributors to go out and find more information. And this has been used to create a real-time index of food prices in places like Brazil and to predict food shortages before they happen. Now, this example, artificial intelligence in medical epidemiology, it's an AI system that can predict dengue outbreaks up to 3 months before they occur. And this example takes both that citizen, the human generated data, in this case it's reports of dengue cases from doctors, with existing data sets, in this case data sets that influence the spread of dengue, 276 variables from things like terrain, roofing and thunderstorms, to predict within a 400-metre radius and 81% accuracy where the next dengue outbreak will occur. And the reason I think all of those examples are really exciting is because by harnessing data in mobile dimensions, multiple dimensions, we can get a much better understanding of the dynamics of complex systems. And when we have a better understanding of the dynamics of complex systems, we can get much better at predicting them and responding to changes in them. The second opportunity is better response to crises when they do occur by shifting power and ability to people on the front line, particularly communities. And we know that with disasters increasing in frequency and humanitarian resources likely to remain stretched, it's going to be even more critical than ever that communities are prepared and communities are able to respond. Now, collective intelligence can help with that because it not only involves people in generating data, helping them understand their situation better, but it also opens up data for them to use. And we know that people's ability to act and their ability to make good decisions is increased when they've got timely and relevant information about their situation. You might be familiar with this example from Indonesia. Every monsoon, Jakarta floods. Peta Bencana crowdsources reports of flooding from citizens on Twitter. It then combines them with official data to create real-time flood maps. Citizens use those maps to then navigate around flooded areas. The government also now uses it to prioritise needs and to communicate their response back to citizens. The Good Sam app is a community-first responder system. It's active in London and in other places around the world. Anyone with medical training can sign up to it. It's also often off-duty health professionals will sign up to it. And in London, it's connected into the London Ambulance Service. So when an accident happens, it will alert people who are nearby to that accident so that they can go and provide life-saving interventions such as CPR before the emergency services get there. The third example is a really early stage prototype. It's one of the things we're funding through our Collective Intelligence Grants Programme. It's a crowdsourcing platform called Deadline that's been developed by Hong Kong University. And that collects information on leftover unwanted bread from bakeries around Hong Kong. It then helps coordinate the movement of a network of volunteers who go collect that bread and redistribute it to places where it's actually needed. Of course, that's great. It's helping to reduce urban food waste. They've got potential application for things like emergency situations, potentially helping communities make smarter movements of things like medical supplies, food and clothing in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. Now, those examples, I think, are exciting because they point to the potential to build something like a central nervous system for communities by integrating all of the information that's available and helping to coordinate the movement of the different parts, the activities of the different parts in a much smarter way. The third example, or the third opportunity rather, is better decision making for long-term recovery. Now, as crises become more protracted, we're obviously seeing the convergence between the humanitarian and the development sectors. And with people being displaced for longer, we need to find new ways of engaging communities in making decisions about their future. And that means tapping into the tacit knowledge that exists in communities and the creativity that exists. Block by Block is an example of participatory design. It uses the game Minecraft. Anyone play Minecraft here? Carlos, Andrew, and your son, great.
My family, yes.
So it has 50 million players around the world. The way this works is that communities are trained in how to use Minecraft, and they then use it to redesign public spaces. So they redesign to address the problems they might have experienced with those spaces in the past, and to create their preferred visions of how they would like to interact with those new urban spaces. Those designs are then given to urban planners who can bring the community's ideas to life. The next example is very different. This is really about the importance of local contextualized knowledge. So in Ethiopia and Nigeria, researchers have been working with teams of subsistence farmers to test different seed varieties for climate resilience. Those citizen science farmers pool their knowledge about which seed varieties fare best, and that crowdsourcing approach has been proven to generate knowledge about which seeds survive extreme weather conditions much better than the seeds that are on official recommended lists. Now, this example, I think, speaks to probably lots of us in the room, because that convergence of development, humanitarian and security means that all of us different agencies need to get better at thinking and acting collectively together. But we know it's really hard. Okay? Any group decision making, fraught with bias, fraught with groupthink, fraught with power dynamics. And through our grants program, that's one of the things that we're looking at addressing, whether artificial intelligence might actually help groups of humans make better decisions together. One of the projects we're funding is a new decision-making system called Unanimous Ai. It uses algorithms that are modelled on the swarming behaviour of bees and fish, and it's been proven to help groups of clinicians make more accurate medical diagnoses. Now we're testing whether it can help groups to make decisions about politically divisive topics more successfully than traditional voting methods.
We never have those.
Shall I say a bit about the centre? Okay. So those are some of the opportunities that I see. I'm really looking forward to hearing Andrew's perspective and also kind of your take. Is this right? What have I missed? I think hopefully you'll get the sense that there's lots of promising practice in collective intelligence design out there. But one of the things that's really missing is any sort of formalised or codified knowledge about how to mobilise different resources of intelligence across organisations or systems. And that's one of the things that as a centre we want to start trying to change. And we're going to be doing this by generating free, publicly available research, by bringing together academics from lots of different disciplines with practitioners. We're also funding, I've talked about some of the experiments we're funding, but we're funding others to carry out experiments in collective intelligence design. We're also working on demonstration projects. So we have a couple at the moment to prove what's possible. So we're working with the UK National Health Service to open up their data set on cancer to try and improve cancer outcomes. And we're working with the government and a couple of cities in the UK to try and create more collectively intelligent labour markets by using novel sources of data on jobs, for example, things like online job ads. We're also wanting to create really practical tools and resources that help people design collective intelligence. So in the autumn, we'll be producing a toolkit that will be opening up for people to use and feedback on, and creating a curriculum. And over the next 2 years, one of our projects is working with UNDP. So you might know that they have set up, or they're in the process of setting up 60 new innovation accelerator labs around the world. And we'll be working with them and supporting them to use collective intelligence design as a method to help accelerate progress on SDGs.
Wonderful.
Well, Kathy, thank you so much for talking about what Nesta is doing, what you personally have experienced and are learning that you think is collective intelligence. You've given us the book Big Mind. If you haven't read this book, please do take a look. And a number of different examples, like the DIY toolkit, which I've shared. It was the instance of what we use to inspire the data playbook for how we might kind of social learn and work together. I think there's lots that we can learn from Nesta and from you personally. So thank you very much for sharing. And I know people are going to have lots of questions, but I'm going to ask Andrew to speak first, and then we'll take questions. So if you have questions, please do mark them down. I promise we will call on you each time.
Okay, give me 15 seconds to just pull this up. So it's great to be with all of you today. How many of you, just out of curiosity, have heard about our organization at all? Okay, a couple. So let me just say, for those of you who haven't, it's great to meet you. I oversee the global humanitarian sustainable development and related social impact portfolio in an organization called Planet. I'm going to tell you more about us in a moment. We've deployed the largest constellation of Earth-observing satellites in history in a giant ring around the Earth, and we image the entire terrestrial surface of the planet every day. And one of the things to know is that we believe very powerfully in, and I think for the self-evident reasons that Kathy made available and demonstrated to us, just in the eminent power of collective intelligence and in kind of tooling the mechanisms for us to deliver better and more efficient insights. But in general, one of the things that is the kind of rate limiter of that activity is just general data. And so the kinds of tools that we make, we think sort of like they're like the sea. They kind of raise all the boats for collective intelligence activities, or at least in a wide variety of areas. And I'll give you some examples. I won't be able to show you all of them. I'll describe some of them to you as well. But I wanted to start with a couple of basic thoughts. And these pick up on what Kathy was talking about. So the first one is a kind of a basic observation, which is that, the speed of information limits the speed of action. And in general, one of the general challenges, and this is a heuristic, not a law. That is to say, sometimes we act when we don't have the information, and sometimes we have the information and we don't then act for all kinds of complicated reasons. But in general, when we want to act in an efficient and reliable and standard way, we're often rate limited by the kind of feedback that we get. And so one of the things that we see that's really interesting is as the volume of information about the world around us that we generate, and we generate that information from new kinds of sensors, in your pocket and in the sky and in space and on the ground, and in liberating data sets and in producing new ones collectively through coalitions of human and machine actors. We begin, there's a certain point where as you add more information, you actually come to a point where you move from reactive models of decision making, looking in the past to see what happened, having some lag between what's going on and your awareness of it, to much more real-time models, and then from real-time models to increasingly predictive models. And that's an incredible opportunity for the humanitarian sector, but only if the sector can actually absorb it. And I think one of the big challenges, not just, this is true at IFRC, but it's true for all the national societies, it's true all the way through the whole chain, is we often are using 19th century tools to solve 21st century challenges and tackle them, and for very sound reasons. Because these tools need to be really reliable, they need to be very cheap, they need to be widely distributed, and so these kinds of new tools and techniques for delivering new kinds of information, they can engender a transformation in the way we make decisions, but we have to think about a new kind of humanitarian sector that can actually absorb them and act on them in new kinds of time signatures. The next thing I want to just mention to you, these are just highlights, because then I'm going to show you a bunch of cool stuff from space. So that's coming in about 30 seconds. Is that we're headed toward a world where through all of these activities that you just heard Kathy talk about, and all of the artificial intelligence activities, many more things about the world are about to be measured continuously than are measured today. And in that kind of environment, in just a kind of typical market economy, the ability to find out what's going on about the world, we're going to be inundated with information. We're actually inundated with information now. We can barely keep up with the kinds of indicators that are coming into us about the world around us today. And we're talking about orders of magnitude more information about the world. And in that kind of environment, measurement becomes cheap, but if human decision-making and wisdom doesn't become commensurately more distributed, it becomes relatively more expensive, right? And so in these kinds of environments, having people who are trained to absorb all of these new insights into the world and act upon them, they require all kinds of new architectures. And I really, you heard this a little bit, Kathy mentioned this, all of this data and all these insights form all kinds of new social and political economies. And we have to build with an idea of like, what are the architectures of participation? People often talk, I hate this term that you probably heard was in vogue for a while, where people are saying data is the new oil, right?
I like to think data is the new soil, because you need growth with it.
That's right. I like it, but data is also like the new renewable. And none of these metaphors are particularly particularly useful. But one really important thing is data is equity. Data is table stakes. And, if you're not at the table, you're often on the menu. And so having information is a form of social power. So one of the things we have to do is we have to build systems that return social power to the people who are closest to the communities that we want to serve. Okay, so I'm going to mention these things not so much because I'm going to talk about them in depth, because I think about them in the background of the examples I'm going to give you. I'm just going to show you one other thing. How many people remember this video game? Does anybody play this video game? Okay. Your people, right? Just by show of hands, how many people? I think a lot of people play this video game. Does anyone know what it's called? It's not Tetris, it's Breakout. Breakout, yeah, right. So what you're looking at here, I want to give you a little data point from the present about where we're at. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot more about sensing and sense making, and I wanted to add an example from the world of artificial intelligence and talk about how it sort of interplays with areas of human knowledge and human expertise, and then we'll get into space. So what you're looking at here is not a human being playing this game. What you're looking at is a generalized learning algorithm that was given no rules about how to play the game and just told to play the game for as long as possible. And in about half an hour of trial and error, it became the greatest breakout champion in the history of the game. It's basically unbeatable, right? And so this happened about 2 years ago. And just this last year, something else really important happened, and that's in the world of chess. Okay, so you all remember when Garry Kasparov lost, he's the famous chess champion, he lost to Deep Blue. Well, the computer that he lost to was a machine that was computing millions and millions and millions of possible chess moves. He's kind of using the brute force method. It was looking at absolutely everything that could possibly happen and then computing statistically what was the best move. Well, the same algorithm, essentially the descendant, like two generations later, but not substantially different. But then the algorithm that was playing Breakout was trained with none of the rules of chess, and in 4.5 hours became the best chess playing artificial intelligence in history, beating everything else that had ever been done in less than 5 hours. And what's really interesting about this particular example is that unlike the things that had come before, the algorithms that use kind of brute force techniques, something deep and powerful was happening inside the algorithm that was learning how to do this. The chess masters who looked at the game that the chess algorithm was playing described it as beautiful. I'm sorry, I also have a cold, so I sound like a gangster. So I'm sorry, very sorry to talk about collective. Yeah. I feel like we should all talk about collective intelligence like this, my friend. Yeah, it's a very nice social learning process you have there. So what was really interesting is that first algorithm that beat the first computer computed like 6 million moves out into the future. Well, this one became the most effective chess playing ever, and it was only competing about 60,000 moves. And the point is that we're now getting tools, algorithms that are starting to get close to new ways of playing, new ways of doing things that human beings have never seen before, and that don't just sort of beat us over the head, but that unlock new dimensions of the problems that we see. And what's particularly interesting to me about this is that it suggests that there are, in the area of intelligence generally, there's this long period where human beings were just the most dominant force in intelligent things in the world. And then there was this moment, if you just think about it in chess, where there was the kind of like the brute force break. We just built a bigger steam engine and we just steamrolled over people. But then there's this new age of sort of hybrid intelligence where the algorithms are actually making us smarter. They're teaching us things that no human being had yet discovered about the problems that we care about. And when you take this kind of activity and you weave it into the kinds of things that we're discovering here, I think it's important to say that all the examples that Kathy gave you, which are great examples, they're all woven into existing processes. And it's entirely possible that through the process of using these kinds of tools, artificial intelligence tools and collective intelligence tools, we will discover that we need to actually let go of entire ways of doing things, that we're just going to replace them with newer and better ways of thinking about the world's problems. Okay, I'm going to go really fast and just through the rest of it just to show you some really cool satellite stuff. So if that's okay in the balance of this talk. We can come back to these ideas a little bit later. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about Planet, because then I'm going to show you what we do. So our mission as an organization, you heard a little bit about Nesta's mission, is to image the whole Earth every day and to make global change visible, accessible, and actionable. We were founded by 3 NASA scientists with a mission to use space to help life on Earth. And the way we do that is by putting essentially a large moral mirror up in space to capture all of human activity upon the planet. Satellites are normally the size of school buses. They weigh tons, and they cost hundreds of millions to billions of dollars to make. Planet's kind of core invention is that we took all of these technologies. Actually, what happened was a group of young NASA scientists said, well, if we work on these, because they take so long to make, we'll just never get there. We'll get to work on 2 missions in our whole career. So they went down to their local consumer electronics store, and they bought a stack of these things, and they brought them back to the lab, and they took the guts out of the phone, and they built a tiny little satellite that you can hold in the palm of your hand, and they brought it to an astronaut who's headed the International Space Station and asked her to throw it out the airlock when she got there to see how your phone would do in space. And it turns out your phone does great in space if it's shielded correctly, and it has a camera and a computer and a GPS and a radio, all the things that these big devices have, but in a tiny little package because we spent trillions of dollars to shrink them down of other people's money. And anytime you can use trillions of dollars of other people's investments, a good idea. So that led to a yeah, that's right. So that led to a revolution in these really small satellites. These are the Planet satellites. They're called doves. They're named for birds of peace. And there's hundreds of them in orbit. And I'll just show you really quickly in the interest of time. This is how we deploy them. So let's imagine Kathy is the sun. Not hard to imagine. Here's the Earth. Just for all of you who failed kindergarten physics, this one goes around that one on an annual basis, spins on a daily basis, is on a slight tilt. And so just imagine that my hand is this Earth, and this is a group of satellites that come over the North Pole. They spin down over the equator, between the sun and the Earth, and down over the South Pole. They spin like this. And as the Earth turns sideways underneath them, they image the entire surface of the planet every day in high resolution. That means we saw your house, this building, every refugee camp, every IDP camp, every agricultural field, every forest, every city, everywhere today, and yesterday and the day before. In fact, actually, this slide is now out of date. We actually have, in most places, more than 1,000 images for every place upon the planet. I'm not sure exactly why that's doing that. So this is we have this what we call a deep stack that's everywhere. And I'm going to show you, this is about understanding kind of change over time. But I will tell you that right off the bat, you can't do much with this imagery unless you really understand what's going on with the ground. And so the great opportunity is to fuse the collective intelligence processes that you heard from Kathy with the ability to sense the world in radically new ways, to create entirely new propositions for volunteers who are working in the IFRC ecosystem, to enable national societies to unlock forecast-based financing mechanisms. There are dozens of opportunities to harmonize these two. Let me just show you what we do with that. So what we do is take all this imagery, and then we use the tools of artificial intelligence that I was just showing you before about playing chess, but we use them. We use the one that, like, you ever go to Google and type in cat or dog and you see a picture of a cat or a dog? So we use those tools, those are called computer vision tools in semantic analysis. Here's an example of someone using our imagery, clicking on a solar installation in China, and then zooming out. And because we're indexing everything that we see, finding every single solar installation available in China at that day. In fact, actually, we're so good at this now, actually, because I find this really interesting, that the Chinese are actually making solar installations in patterns that are only visible from space. So we think they're making them for us, because we're the only people who can see them.